Good evening. My name's Rob McNeil. I'm the co-host of Liberation Now Radio on Facebook, YouTube, Rogers Channel 946, FM 102.7, and streaming live at radiowaterloo.ca. Tonight you're going to see a composite video of some of the amazing speakers that presented at the Committee for General Government on Bill 156 on Monday, June 8th and Tuesday, June 9th. I apologize that we couldn't use all of the footage or even all of the speakers, but I hope there's a broad spread of stuff here. I should also add that not all of the views expressed by some of the presenters would necessarily be shared by some of the others, so take it as you find it. Thanks. We have a bit of a call to action. If you are willing to send a final email or tweet at your MPP to see how they plan on voting if there are no amendments, that'd be great. But if not, just sit back and enjoy. We're actually going to start with a real mic drop. You've probably seen some of the videos already, but this is Chandra McKinnon, a regular Ontarian, if there is such a thing, who lives in rural Ontario and has some eloquent and strong opinions on the state of biosecurity and Bill 156.
There are 14.57 million people in this province. They're not all farmers, and they have a right to have a protest. In reviewing the data regarding biosecurity failures in Canada, it appears that almost every single incident recorded has been a failure at the agricultural level, not a trespass by the public. Included in that is feed that has animal renderings in it, the import and export of animals. I can state without reservation that biosecurity protocols are not regularly followed in the community that I reside in. Farmers do go from farm to farm in the same gear. In fact, if one took the time to review the leaked coverage from various people that have trespassed, which is aired usually live, not delayed, they usually follow biosecurity protocols better than most farmers in rural Ontario that I live near. By the way, the court has already proven animal activists don't harm animals. It's not their nature. They also don't harm people. It's not their nature. What are you hiding is a question that's always brought up. I would like to take this opportunity to point out that I'm also concerned that a lawyer that's represented the dairy farmers of Ontario as a client prior to election is the sitting chair at this meeting. For clarity, you can't disrespect people who are only trying to help animals, and they don't harm you, and you shouldn't have more rights than I do. That's the end.
We're going to switch gears now and show part of Anita Crines' presentation. Anita is the co-founder of Toronto Pig Save, if you've been living under a rock, and tells a really powerful story of the difference between the lives of animals in sanctuaries and those confined by animal agriculture, as well as the rationale behind bearing witness.
I was inspired by Leo Tolstoy, Mahatma Gandhi, Cesar Chavez, Saul Alinsky, Lois Gibbs, among other love-based community organizers when we formed our first Toronto Pig Save chapter. We used the following main strategies: bearing witness. Bill 156 attempts to criminalize this historic ethical method. 2, love-based community organizing. 3, vegan outreach. In 2015, I was charged with criminal mischief for giving water to thirsty pigs, and then acquitted with the great work of my two prominent and well-established criminal lawyers, James Silver and Gary Grill, both of whom are vegan. We fought and failed to get pigs recognized as persons under the law instead of the demeaning property these intelligent, sentient beings are referred to in order to enable us to slaughter them. We succeeded in showing compassion is not a crime. That is, following the golden rule, giving water to a thirsty animal. Bill 156 attempts to overturn this just ruling. We all have a moral duty to bear witness. Leo Tolstoy defined bearing witness as not looking away from suffering creatures, but coming close and trying to help. At animal vigils in front of slaughterhouses, we face the animals. We look them in the eyes and see their scared, innocent souls. We see how dirty they are. We experience the smell. We hear the industrial sounds. They hear more acutely. Our physical presence is a moral duty similar to the Quakers and Greenpeace protesting atmospheric nuclear tests. We all share a duty to bear witness to animals in slaughterhouses in our communities. I invite each and every one of you to join Toronto Cow Save and Toronto Pig Save at our weekly vigils. At slaughterhouse vigils, you see scared and terrified animals who don't want to die. At sanctuaries, you see the opposite. At the pig preserve, Richard Hoyo, a former Marine, has 170 pigs roaming free on 100 acres in Tennessee. The pigs form their own social groupings, not so much organized in terms of type, age, or size, but in terms of their personality and disposition. They roam the entire sanctuary in a day, foraging for blackberries, grass, walnuts, persimmons, and other foods. The pigs hate being confined. Sound familiar? The pigs smell like plants. Esther the Wonder Pig, who's a celebrity pig living in Campbellville, smells like maple syrup. Our beloved dogs smell like corn chips. Pigs in factory farms and transport trucks smell horrible and sickly. Dario Fo, an Italian Nobel laureate and playwright, writes in his book, that is what happens to them when they're locked up, animals in captivity, forced to live in a cage. That's what makes them smell like that. Normally, freedom has no stench. When they are at liberty in the forest, they certainly do not smell that way. Those of us who have been in quarantine now have an inkling of an idea of what animals experience. Let people see, because people would not support this if they saw what was happening to these intelligent creatures. Would you put a dog in a crate for months, and the dog not being allowed to turn around, and then forcibly impregnating the dog, and then taking their babies away, and then doing this in a repeated cycle? This is today's farming, and it's unethical, and it's also destroying the climate, and it's hurting our health. It's processed meat is a group 1 carcinogen according to WHO. So it's insanity. Our current system is insanity. Our house is on fire, says Greta, and animal agriculture is one of the big reasons. So we do vigils in front of slaughterhouses. We have the right to protest. This bill would try to eliminate that, and bearing witness is a moral duty. Quakers did it. Greenpeace did it. It's going to a site of injustice and trying to correct it. And I think this bill is unconstitutional.
Bill 156 is a serious issue. However, I thought we could throw in a little light relief of some industry lowlights from some of the presentations by Animal Agriculture. We have Debbie from King Cole Ducks, who makes amazing assertions about what happened on her farm when activists went there to rescue ducks earlier in the year. We have Meat and Poultry Ontario, who encourages whistleblowers, just not the kind that get hired just to blow the whistle. And if you listen closely, you can hear him throw in a "we have nothing to hide" right at the end of his testimony. And we also have Laura from Centennial Carriages, who tells a poignant and emotional story about things that might have happened in Niagara-on-the-Lake protests, such as activists might have thrown things from their vehicles had they chosen to, but they didn't. It's a serious issue, but I hope you enjoy these presentations, very short as they are, as much as I did. Thank you.
Debbie Conzelman, CEO of King Cole Ducks. On February 18th at approximately 5:30 a.m., 15 animal rights activists trespassed onto our property and broke into one of our barns while the flock was sleeping. Video footage showed the activists running through the barn, shining flashlights into the frightened flock, causing them to stampede, flip over, and overcrowd. These actions caused undue stress and injury to our ducks and violated essential biosecurity protocols. These activists broke the law. They trespassed onto our property, broke into a barn, stole ducks, and caused stress to our flock. They hope to showcase a business that has no regard for animal welfare. Nothing could be further from the truth. The well-being of our flocks is paramount importance to us. Collectively, we have 1,987 years of experience amongst the ownership and staff who work hard to ensure our birds are well cared for.
First of all, I want to say that we're very supportive of whistleblowing. We think that every company should have a policy on animal rights and procedures on how to report animal rights abuse. We think that's extremely important. The challenge we have is where people come in on a temporary basis to get employment in jobs and record things under the pretense that they're there for employment, when their only job is to really get highlight footage of something that looks bad.
You would make, under that, an investigative reporter from the Toronto Star would fall under that. And you would agree that they should not be allowed to do an investigation?
I would say he could obtain information through proper government channels.
Thank you. No further.
We have nothing to hide. Meat processing plant employees have been harassed, attacked, physically assaulted, and intimidated by trespassers in their workplace. Unauthorized access to processing facilities by activist groups have put animals in direct danger. It's a violation of my freedom if somebody's lying to me about getting access to my property.
They could throw something out the window to spook the horse, or they could drive recklessly and get too close to us. So many things they could have done while they were following me that day, which makes me feel so very unsafe. And there was nothing I could do to stop them.
That lighthearted relief was brought to you by Globally Local. You won't live any longer, but you'll wish you did so that you could eat more Globally Local. Here's a really good summary of legal issues and other issues surrounding Bill 156 from Camille Labchuk, Executive Director of Animal Justice.
We are Canada's only animal law advocacy organization, representing tens of thousands of Canadians, and we work to improve laws protecting animals. Unfortunately, there is a lot to do because Canada has some of the worst animal protection laws in the Western world. And Bill 156 is about to make a bad situation far worse. This bill is what's known as an Ag-Gag law, which attacks whistleblowers and prevents them from exposing illegal and unethical practices on farms. This is pure protectionism for the farm industry, and it's inspired by similar laws in the US that never should have crept into Canada. Here's what's at stake. Last year in this country, we killed 834 million chickens, pigs, cows, and other animals for food. What they endure is far beyond our worst nightmares. They spend their lives in deplorable conditions, mostly in dark, windowless warehouses. The farming industry treats them like commodities instead of sentient animals who feel both physical and mental anguish. Standard farming practices include things like castration, debeaking, cutting off tails without anesthesia, confining hens in battery cages so small they can't spread their wings, chaining calves to veal crates, and keeping mother pigs in gestation crates that prevent them from even turning around. I know you're going to hear from farm commodity groups who will boast about their very high standards of animal care, but this is false. Canada doesn't even regulate or monitor animal welfare on farms. Standard farming practices are exempt from provincial animal protection laws like the PAWS Act, so farmers get to make up their own rules through this massive loophole. The fox is guarding the henhouse. When the public does see the truth, most of the time that's because a whistleblower takes photos or videos. Shocking videos shot by whistleblowing employees have resulted in hundreds of news stories and aired on high-profile shows like CTV National News, Marketplace, and W5. These investigative stories have led to animal cruelty prosecutions and convictions and policy changes. But the bill would effectively shut down those hidden camera videos. Under Section 4.6, it would be illegal for someone to gain access to a facility through a false pretense. This would include an employee who seeks a job on a farm, follows all the rules, but didn't disclose that they care about animals and intend to blow the whistle if they see illegal cruelty. This would include investigative journalists. And this would include a worker whose employment agreement says they won't film inside the farm. If that person still sees something so disturbing they feel they have to go public, they would be punished. Now, this isn't only about animal cruelty. This also goes for workplace safety violations. Canada's biggest COVID infections have all been in slaughterhouses, and slaughter workers are terrified to go to work. Some of them have died. Under 156, a person who exposes those unsafe workplace conditions or takes a photo of inadequate protective gear could be prosecuted and fined. The bill attacks whistleblowers who expose criminal conduct in the workplace. The bill also attacks people who expose animal cruelty during transport, and you heard from Anita Crimes, who does vigils outside slaughterhouses. They frequently document violations of animal transport laws, and I know this because I help them file complaints with authorities. Inspectors are seldom watching and even more rarely prosecute, even when animals are overheating, when they arrive frozen solid as hockey pucks at the slaughterhouse, or when they suffer injuries from overcrowding. Citizen complaints are essential, and the provisions in Section 5.2 of this bill that prevent people from gathering outside slaughterhouses and interacting with animals on transport trucks, those would further reduce oversight and stop people from seeing suffering inside those trucks. These aspects of Bill 156 are also clearly unconstitutional. Ag-Gag laws are a U.S. import. Farmers have pushed for these draconian laws typically after undercover footage exposes cruelty that farm lobby groups don't want people to see. When they do pass, Ag-Gag laws in the U.S. have been repeatedly struck down in court as unconstitutional, including in Idaho, Utah, Iowa, and Kansas. And the reason for this is because they restrict freedom of speech, which is one of our most cherished rights in a democracy. Over 40 Canadian legal experts have already written to tell the government that Bill 156 is unconstitutional too, because it attacks our chartered protected right to free expression. You'll hear from some of those experts, and I'll leave it to them to elaborate. The government says this bill is about biosecurity on farms and stopping trespass, but it's not. Trespassing is already an offense. If the government wants higher fines to deter concerned citizens from trespassing on farms to see those conditions for themselves, that could be done without targeting employee whistleblowers. The bill isn't about biosecurity either. The government has never once explained how a whistleblowing employee could pose any risk whatsoever to biosecurity, because this is someone who's legally employed at the farm, follows all the rules, and simply films illegal cruelty if they see it. There's no risk, and not a single US court has accepted the biosecurity argument because it's not a legitimate concern. The bill actually makes biosecurity worse by preventing whistleblowers from exposing conditions that could lead to public health threats, like viruses or antibiotic-resistant superbugs. I remind you that COVID-19 emerged from a wildlife market in China, but that a deadly virus could just as easily have come from a factory farm in North America. And they have. Strains of swine flu and bird flu already have. Deadly strains. Warehousing thousands of genetically similar animals in filthy conditions creates an ideal breeding ground for pathogens. Animal farming needs more transparency, not less. This bill is a huge step backwards, and the unconstitutional aspects of it will inevitably be challenged and lose in court. We've seen this movie before. The lengthy court battle will waste taxpayer funds at a time when we're going further into debt to respond
You have
to the
1 minute
pandemic.
left.
Thank you. The law will be struck down and whistleblowers' exposés will once again be legal. But in the meantime, the court case will be a constant reminder of the abject cruelty and suffering that the farm industry is desperate to hide. I want to close by reminding you that Animal Justice testified in support of the New Paws Act a year before this, last year before a committee just like this one. And government MPPs quoted me on the floor of the legislature praising the Paws Act in debates. The animal protection community and animal justice is more than willing to engage and work with the government. But this is the first chance I've had to sit face to face with anyone in the government despite multiple meeting requests about this bill. Instead, it's the farm industry's fingerprints that are all over 156. But your job as legislators is not simply to protect the profits of farmers. It's your job to protect vulnerable members of society, and this absolutely includes farm animals. Please prioritize animals, transparency in the food system, and public health.
Now we have some testimony from Liz White, a previous guest on Liberation Now Radio, who is a director of the Animal Alliance of Canada political party. Thanks.
Why create a new piece of legislation when one already exists? And why not use the Trespass to Property Act to achieve some of the goals that are said to be in Bill 156? I think the answer to that question is contained in some parts of the bill, specifically Section 4 and Section 5 of the bill. I'm going to only talk about Section 4, and subsection 6 of that section is designed to prevent inspections conducted by journalists. Under Bill 156, the unacceptable conditions of the animals would have continued unreported because such investigation would be made illegal under Bill 156. Under normal circumstances, the government provides us with very little information about the conditions under which farmed animals are forced to live. Occasionally, we get a glimpse into the industry, as happened in the 2-year trial between the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Maple Lodge Farms, where both broiler chickens and spanned hens died in very large numbers during transport to slaughter in inclement weather. Animals have the right to live their lives free of pain and suffering. They deserve to be considered sentient beings, not production units. Ontario taxpayers have the right to know what happens to animals on farms. COVID-19 has provided us with a very real opportunity to work together to change our approach to farm animals. We have a very real opportunity to move away from industrialized animal agriculture, which we know contributes heavily to the climate crisis we face, and we know that the animals face great deprivation, cruelty, and suffering.
Now we're going to dive deeper into legal analysis of Bill 156 with some expert commentary by Jody Lazar, constitutional lawyer extraordinaire, followed by Alexandra Pester, criminal lawyer from Toronto who worked on the Anita Crines case. Thank you.
And I'm here specifically because I'm concerned that Ontario might be on the verge of adopting a law that would not survive a constitutional challenge. In February, I signed a letter to this effect, along with more than 40 legal experts, and I want to use my time here to flesh out some of the concerns expressed there. So I'm going to focus on two things, which are the two parts to a constitutional analysis, starting with the first question, which is whether the legislation limits charter rights. And here it's pretty clear to me and to others that Bill 156 in its current form does in fact restrict charter freedoms. So specifically Section 4.6, the false pretenses provision, and Section 5, more broadly, the transport provision. So for false pretenses, the difficulty here is that the provision dictates what someone is and is not allowed to say. It targets a particular message, a misrepresentation, and says you cannot say this. And that's a clear violation of freedom of expression. But more significant, perhaps, is the effect of the prohibition, which is, of course, as you've heard several times today, that it limits the ability of undercover journalists, for example, or undercover or whistleblowing employees to share information with the public, to ensure that Canadian consumers understand the consequences of their purchasing choices, and to ensure that the public can make informed choices about what they buy, what they eat, and what they support. So in the United States, where similar laws have been struck down, legislative reforms regarding animal farming and food safety have often resulted from pressure following undercover exposés. And the same is true of dietary choices. Research again in the US, we don't have that research yet in Canada, but to my knowledge, but suggests that the majority of Americans who change their diets to include fewer animal products, they do so as a result of what they learn about commercial farming and about the treatment of farm animals. Now, whether or not we agree with those choices, the fact is that people have a right to the information on which to base them. So the Supreme Court of Canada has been unequivocal about the fact that Section 2B of the Charter, freedom of expression, protects not only the right to speak, but also the right to listen and the right to receive that kind of information that influences those choices. With respect to the transport provision, it seems to me that it's in clear conflict with the Charter right to freedom of peaceful assembly, Section 2C. You know, it's telling people, animal rights activists, members of the SAVE movement who demonstrate outside of slaughterhouses, that they cannot hold those gatherings. But I would also argue that the provision limits freedom of expression as well. So people who protest outside of slaughterhouses, who approach transport trucks with animals on them, they're carrying out a particular form of expressive activity. It's the act of what they call bearing witness, you heard about this today, to the final moments of animals' lives, and documenting and sharing what they see with members of the public. And the law, again, here it's telling them, you can't do that. You can't express yourself in this particular way. Last thing I'll say about the limits themselves before I move briefly on to justification, step 2, I just want to highlight the nature of the expression that we're dealing with here. The expression in question here is political activism, it's truth-seeking, it's information sharing, and these are the purposes of freedom of expression. So this is expression on an issue that's deeply meaningful to activists, and it's also a proper subject for public debate. Again, U.S. courts in the cases dealing with similar laws have recognized this. Courses on animal law are now offered in at least half the law schools across the country. I've given public lectures on this subject to full auditoriums. So all that to say that this is a subject that people care about legally and politically, which is why it's what I would characterize as high-value speech. And I'm borrowing that phrase from the Supreme Court, which has said multiple times that political speech really lies at the heart of freedom of expression, which is itself one of our most fundamental freedoms. Now, what that means in practical terms is that restrictions on that speech are going to be harder for the government to justify, as justification under the Charter is the government's burden.
And The other thing that we've heard about this morning in the States, when this legislation was challenged for being against, I think it's the First Amendment in the States, the First Amendment rights, it actually raised the profile of this issue to the point where farmers were saying, you know, forget this legislation, it's actually harming our business more than it's helping. Could you foresee something like that happening here?
I mean, certainly a challenge is going to bring attention. It's going to bring media attention. You know, especially in the days of social media, people can live tweet and get everything out there immediately. So a court challenge would probably include evidence about agricultural practices that animal rights activists are opposed to, would put those on public record. And it would draw a lot of attention, not just to the fact that that the legislation enables the agricultural industry to hide their practices, but also about practices themselves that not everybody agrees with. So it would certainly bring attention.
One of the examples of vague language used in this bill is the word interact under section 5.2 and 4.4. The former prohibits interference or interaction with an animal being transported without the prior consent of the driver, and the latter prohibits interference or interaction with a farm animal in or on one of the listed areas in the legislation without the prior consent. The word is undefined in the legislation. It could capture and will capture broad amounts of activity. It will impact on currently lawful activities, including protesters that attend public property outside of slaughterhouses. What about a non-protester who's driving alongside a transport truck? They have passengers in the vehicle and they decide to roll their windows down and wave at the animals or say hello to the animals. That would be captured in this legislation. Or what about an employee who is not an undercover investigator but already works there and decides that they need to capture an image of something that they think is unacceptable, and they start taking photographs and videos? Are they going to be captured by this law because they didn't get consent from their employer first? The Supreme Court has told us time and again that legislation cannot also be arbitrary. The activities the legislation prohibits cannot bear no relationship to the purpose that it purports to have. This legislation runs a very real risk of being struck down and not in compliance with those principles. This vagueness, the second issue I want to talk about is the delegation of powers to people that are untrained. So the vagueness becomes more troubling when taken together with how the bill delegates power over enforcement to private citizens who aren't trained to use that kind of authority. These are things that the police are specifically trained to do, get tons of guidance from the court, and they still get wrong. I'm concerned about this also escalating conflict on the ground.
If you're still with us, we might include a little snippet here of that full Rob McNeil. Against my better wishes, we'll give him some airtime to talk about just a few aspects of Bill 156 and the invitation to the Minister of Agriculture and his nephew to come on the show. Liberation Now radio show is obviously still open. Thanks.
Bad laws lead to legal challenges and become focal points and rally cries, just the attention the industry doesn't want. So in some ways, thank you for Ernie's Law. It's a poor bill in so many areas that it will advance the cause of fighting for animal liberation for years to come, and activists will not stop. The legacy of Minister Hardeman will be sowing more division between farmers and animal rights activists. Just please go back to the drawing board. Listen to all your voters, not just the lobbyists. We try system change. Nation Rising is a political advocacy group that seeks changes in federal laws and policies and in different provinces. We are non-violent and we're always ready to talk. But Ernie's Law has been pushed forward and rushed without our voices at the table. It's hard to imagine that in the midst of a global pandemic and now massive and awesome Black Lives Matter protests, that passing this Ag-Gag law to silence us is the best use of government time. Whistleblowers are an essential part of any democracy. Consider the recent report about conditions in some Ontario rest homes. Would the government pass a law banning whistleblowers in those facilities? Yet Maple Leaf Foods killed 23 seniors from listeria in 2008 due to poor hygiene practices. This new law criminalizes the kind of whistleblowing that could prevent these kinds of things happening. So welcome to the new wave of activism. We're organized, strategic, intersectional, and still committed and relentless as ever. Activist Amy Serrano of Meet the Victims says that the problem is not civil disobedience, it is civil obedience in the face of unjust laws. and activists will not stop. We are all earthlings here. This is the only planet we have, and Mother Earth is throwing us a bunch of huge hints lately. Bushfires in Australia, a plague of coronavirus, climate change. Time is running out. Speciesism is discrimination based on biological difference. We should treat all species as we ourselves would like to be treated. Can this committee make the connection to the billions of non-human individuals exploited just for our human wants? Activists feel that connection, and activists will not stop. Look at the numbers. The Ontario Federation of Agriculture asked farmers and Ontarians to show support for Bill 156, and we're able to get just a few thousand to support. Yet 40,000 plus humans signed the petition to stop Bill 156. Plainly put, there are far more, 10 times more at least, votes in helping animals and encouraging transparency. By giving the animal ag industry what they thought they wanted without considering the consequences, you just toughen our resolve to work harder and shine even more light and save even more animals. You also highlight the hypocrisy of an animal agriculture industry that says they have nothing to hide, but begs for a law to help hide it. Activists will not stop. I would encourage any of the MPPs to come on the Liberation Now radio show and discuss animal ag, speciesism, and Bill 156 with me.
I've been a farmer my whole life, and I am completely opposed to a lot of things you said. But I really appreciate you coming here, and we need to find a balance. You like this bill because it gives you a platform. And if I could do one thing on the agriculture side, I would want to take your platform away. And I think the Ag-Gag part gives you a bigger platform. I really believe that. Would you agree with me?
I would agree that this law is so badly written that it is definitely going to raise awareness of animal agriculture. I suspect it was conceived with an attempt to hide bad actors or just to deny the public access to what's there. And I think that lack of transparency is not what the farmers ultimately want. But more transparency is definitely a good thing. There's no denying that I would like to see the end of animal agriculture. But more transparency, if there's nothing to hide, why are they trying so hard to hide it?
Thank you.
It's time for Jenny McQueen. Jenny McQueen is a long-time DXE activist and has been arrested, I believe, 7 times, unless she's been busy since I last asked her. Here is her story of some of her experiences in activism.
Yes, I entered a pig farm uninvited. Yes, I rescued a piglet who needed medical treatment. I faced 10 years in prison, but the Crown dropped my charges, deeming it not in the public interest. What I and others have witnessed would turn your stomach. This is why I'm speaking up against the Ag-Gag bill, which wants to silence citizens, whistleblowers, and even journalists. I believe I'm a respectable citizen. For over a decade, I was an analyst in the Ontario government. I'm also an animal rights activist with Direct Action Everywhere. We are fiercely non-violent. I've worn full biosecurity gear when I've entered farms. We need to stop thinking of animals as food. It's time to transition to plant-based proteins and defund animal ag. The world is in crisis with COVID-19. It's another virus from the animal world. SARS, swine flu, avian flu, MERS, Ebola, all come from animal use and exploitation. Animals in Canada are confined in filthy conditions, the perfect breeding ground for the next pandemic. It's a travesty how the animal ag industry is deceiving the public and politicians about food safety. Animal protection zones? A real animal protection zone would be where animals are free to live their lives without being mutilated, artificially inseminated, and transported to their early deaths. Farmers do care about their animals, but in reality, they are mere commodities for them, dollar signs. Perhaps dairy and beef farmers form relationships with their animals, but pig and chicken farmers? Nope. These farmers are not bad apples. They're just struggling to work within a system that is morally corrupt. It's time to transition to growing plants that do so well in Canada, such as yellow peas, a delicious ingredient in vegan meats. Nation Rising, a Canadian organization, will help you transition. Children's toys and books still portray farm animals as having a good life. An industry coloring book has pigs frolicking in the grass, with chickens pecking at the dirt around them. Deceiving children too, this is criminal. As an animal rights activist, I've personally witnessed the reality. Huge white sheds are the new norm in the Canadian countryside. Pristine from the outside, but filthy and stuffed full of animals on the inside. Hidden from the public view, hidden from the sunlight, and denied any basic natural behaviors. The pig barns and chicken barns I've been inside are a nightmare. There's rats scurrying around, flies everywhere, dust and cobwebs. Strong ammonia attacking the electrical systems, no reasonable fire protection. One upstanding farmer who took the stand in the Anita Crines case was in the news in 2018 after 3,000 pigs burned to death in his building. I can't let my mind go there too much. It's devastating to think about. We hear pig gestation crates have been banned. They haven't. Existing farms are exempt. Mother pigs are literally unable to turn around to nurture their young. They give birth in the dead of night, no one to take care of them. There's miscarriages with dead piglets in the afterbirth. And workers are expected to do this awful cleanup? I filmed a piglet discarded in the corridor, obviously rotting for days. Their stomach was blackened from the inside out. At Adair Pork, there was a female pig, heavily pregnant, with a massive bloody prolapse, obviously in pain. Last Chance for Animals discovered a nasty term in another investigation called slash and grab, a procedure where they slash open their stomach, remove the babies, then kill the mother pig. How is that allowed? Another bold-faced humane lie was exposed at King Cole Ducks earlier this year. Animal justice lawyers are now able to lodge a formal complaint for false advertising following Rose's Law activists exposing the horrors inside. 3 of them are now facing jail for their action. Animal rights activists are only concerned about exposing the conditions that animals endure. Farmers' homes are very rarely near any animal ag operation due to the strong stench of ammonia from the sheds. Bearing witness is an essential form of activism, which allows the public to see how animals arrive at slaughterhouses, for example, suffering in the extreme heat of Canadian summers. I have a message to the public. Before they fine you thousands of dollars for wanting to see the truth, join an Animal Save movement vigil. Look an animal in the eye. That's what ignited my passion. That's why I stopped viewing animals as food. I have a message to farm workers. Now is the time to become a whistleblower before they fine you thousands of dollars. Message me. Canadian citizens, please continue to challenge unjust laws. Civil disobedience is a valid tactic. The women's suffragette movement proves my point. It can be difficult and it can be challenging, but it's something that we must stand up for. It's something that we must do. This is how laws change. We must continue to put these awful industries on trial. It has to be said again, animals are not food. Finally, compassion is not a crime. Thank you.
Okay, so Rob and Jenny, really quick, we've had a number of farmers express concerns about people trespassing on their private property. I guess, are you concerned about that and feel like that's a valid concern that farmers have? Go ahead, Jenny. Yeah.
Personally, no, because we only enter the barns where the animals are. We do not need or want to see any human when we're going into these places. As I said, the farms are not next to any houses, and if the houses are nearby, then we choose not to go there. We are only interested in the animals, We wear full biosecurity gear. We are not harming anyone.
You wanted this case to go to court.
Yes. And I'm also facing criminal charges for an investigation in Quebec. We went inside Quebec into Port Greg. They are an upstanding family. They are on all the organizations for their industry. And yet we go inside there and the place is broken. That's the only way I can describe it. So if someone like myself doesn't go inside, then how is this industry going to be put on the stand? It's a really valid question.
There's no increased funding for one of the things that farmers were frustrated with is that they call and no one shows up. Citizens arrest. Are you concerned about that part of the bill?
You know, I'm concerned that no one shows up for the animals. When I reported to the OSPCA as it was, and to the Fire and the Electrical Safety Authority, I don't get any feedback whatsoever that my concerns have been addressed. I really do not believe that there's any humane way to have pigs or chickens in today's society. Walk inside any of these sheds, you'd be horrified. Your senses are overwhelmed. The animals are just miserable inside. There's no humane way to provide meat for the population who want it in a cheap form. Look up documentaries such as 73 Cows or The Last Pig, and you'll see that animal farmers absolutely want to transition away from their industry too.
Here comes Brian. Brian Brophy is an activist who does a really good analysis of why Bill 156 is bad from an activist point of view. I really enjoyed this.
Bottom line, parts of Bill 156 are legally indefensible and none of it is necessary. It should not be passed, not as is, and not even with amendments. This bill should not be taking up important legislative time and attention when we need to figure out how to recover from a global lockdown and economic disruption. The animal agriculture industry has said that current laws against trespass are not sufficient, that the problem is growing. But they have not offered any statistics or proof of that assertion, just identically scripted claims and references to a tiny number of specific incidents. My wife and I have attended the vigils organized by Anita Kreinz's Save movement. You heard from her this morning. I can tell you that the slaughterhouse truck drivers behave recklessly and threateningly near these legal protests. I don't see the government proposing new laws to prevent this conduct. They simply would say that there are already laws against dangerous driving. So for some reason, the concerns of protesters are ignored, while the unsupported claims of animal agriculture operators are taken at face value and justify draconian new legislation. The hypocrisy of Bill 156 can be summed up by its defined term, animal protection zone. To call a slaughterhouse an animal protection zone is an offense against logic, reality, and the English language. The operators of a slaughterhouse want to protect animals for the 5 minutes it will take before they can cruelly kill and dismember them. Let's be honest, it is not the animals that are meant to be protected, but the profits of the slaughterhouse. I think the acronym APZ actually stands for Animal Profiteering Zone. Note also the ridiculous idea that the bill is meant to protect the health and well-being of the animals from the trespassing animal rights activists. No farm animal, not 1% of the total, has ever suffered or died from activist trespass-induced illness, as far as I'm aware. But 100% of the animals in a slaughterhouse APZ are killed long before their natural lifespans. Basically, biosecurity and food safety are just pretexts for the bill's punitive attack on animal rights activism. No problem with these issues has ever been traced back to animal rights activists. Even the biosecurity problems mentioned by the minister on the floor of the legislature, he admits were caused by agriculture workers themselves. So how long will the animal agriculture industry be allowed to misdirect our attention and concerns? In short, in June 2020, when it is so clear how important whistleblowers are to publicizing and preventing police brutality and all manner of social ills. Now is not the time for the legislature of Ontario to put itself in the position of passing a law that chills whistleblowing and exaggerates, demonizes, and restricts legitimate peaceful protest. Most of your agriculture sector deputants have been spoken in favor of Bill 156, but if you Google, I think as recently as 2013 or 2014, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and I think it may have been in reaction to the American developments, the OFA came out and said, we don't want Ag-Gag laws because they destroy public confidence and they make us look bad. And so we don't want them. Now, I don't know what's happened since then that they've changed their mind, but it does speak to the issue that has been brought up about consumer confidence.
Now we have a short excerpt from Marina von Kaiserlink, researcher at University of British Columbia, who explains, surprise, surprise, that consumers lose confidence in the animal agriculture industry when Ag-Gag laws are introduced. Shock horror.
Participants exposed to the Ag-Gag laws were less likely to agree that farm animals have good lives. This is a bit disconcerting, this slide, because generally speaking, even in the control treatment, we didn't find that they were very strongly in agreement with that statement. Lastly, the take-home points: most people were unaware of Ag-Gag laws, and learning about them led to the decrease in trust in farmers and an increase in support for animal welfare regulations. This study also provides evidence that awareness of Ag-Gag negatively impacts perceptions.
Now we're going to hear a few words to wrap things up from Rachel Finan. Rachel got to testify on the Tuesday when no video was live streamed by the government due to lack of resources somehow. However, she recorded herself, and I think she really does a good job of summarizing some of the previous day's testimony and challenges the legislators to do better. Thanks.
I watched the whole day's proceedings yesterday, and you were provided with statistics, data, actual activist accounts, and the unanimous opinion from legal experts that this bill would not stand up in court. Why? Because it's unconstitutional. I believe that the attempt to push this through during this time in the middle of a pandemic is also undemocratic. But I will leave you to think about that. I made notes yesterday, and in my presentation I will highlight some of the parts I really want you to consider and employ as the basis of your critical thinking around this bill. It should be thrown out. Legal protections are in place already, and activists won't be deterred by changes anyway. I have witnessed pigs, cows, chickens, goats, and sheep head into the slaughterhouse. They've come from the farms that you are wanting to protect. It's heartbreaking and disturbing. Their eyes plead with you to help them. They're covered in feces, they're roasting hot or freezing cold. They've often lived a deplorable life, and they know where they're heading to their death. There's not much I can do, so I look them in the eye and tell them I'm sorry and that I'm doing my best to help them. I implore any of you to come just for one truck. I will come with you. I want you to see what I know. If you're not prepared to do that, go to one of the Toronto Save pages and watch those videos yourself. They are true accounts of the state these animals turn up to the slaughterhouse in. The video footage that undercover investigators, whistleblowers, and activists obtain is real and true. These brave, compassionate people put their emotional health on the line to obtain these pictures and videos. I was at the duck protest that was referred to yesterday. I was not inside, I was outside, but I was in full support of the people inside. And the ducks with their feet caught in the floor were not caused by the activists. They were there already, suffering greatly, and they rescued them. The lies I heard yesterday really upset me. I'll say this loud and clear too. I'm not sure it came across as well as it should have done. Animal activists are non-violent. We do non-violent training. We are non-violent and love-based. None of this is to attack humans. That's never show me one case of any Ontario-based activism that has resulted in harm to a human. Yesterday, there was talk about balance. I don't think that there's any such thing of balance here, but I do think there are solutions. So I'm a solutions-orientated woman. Live stream from inside the barns 24/7. Activists won't ever need to be there. Let the general population see where their food comes from and allow them to make informed decisions. The public and the animals deserve more transparency, not less. Why don't the farmers live stream 24/7? I know why. Because they don't want you to see. Canada Food Guide last year basically removed dairy completely and minimised animal flesh consumption to a matchbox size a day. Why are we not sat here discussing ways to help farmers transition to a more sustainable, healthier, less traumatic plant-based farming model? Nation Rising tracks and highlights the subsidies given to animal agriculture. And if you take a look at their website, I'm sure even your toes will curl at the amount of money given to propping up an archaic and cruel industry. This bill is ill thought out, deplorably timed, I've already said that, and draconian at its core. As a 20-year HR recruitment director, I can tell you that your false pretenses clause won't stand up either. Providing other resume details are correct, no one has to disclose if they are vegan. It is their creed. And whilst precedent has only been tested once and won in a court of law, people cannot be forced to disclose veganism under the Human Rights Code. So we will find activists who haven't done any other activism yet to go undercover. Peter Tabbins is my MPP, and I have a promise from him that he will not be voting for this bill without significant amendments. I am imploring him to not vote yes at all. But actually, on another side, please do go ahead and pass this bill. The publicity we will garner from this will be invaluable.
Okay, so that's pretty much it, folks. If you've made it this far, I'd like again to remind you of a possible call to action to contact your MPP and ask what their position is now on Bill 156. It probably won't make much difference, but you know, anytime you contact your MPP, it gets the idea of animals and animal justice in their minds, and that can't be a bad thing. I wish you all a good night. I hope you join us again on Liberation Now Radio, on Facebook, YouTube, 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo, Rogers Channel 946, and streaming live at radiowaterloo.ca. It also repeats on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. on radiowaterloo.ca and 102.7 FM. Thanks, and have a good night.
My friends are playful.
They love frolicking in the grass
and the lively game of tag or soccer.
My friends are kind and gentle.
They can be a little sneaky and cheeky too.
Some are even amateur escape artists.
Indeed, my friends are very clever,
adventurous,
and curious.
Resilient too.
My friends are protective and loyal.
They enjoy being with their friends and family.
My friends feel love,
happiness,
and joy.
My friends see us and hear us.
But we don't see or hear them.
Many of my friends will never know anything but sadness,
fear,
and violence.
My friends should feel safe and protected.
But the Ontario government wants to silence us.
Silence us.
Silence us.
My friends are in real danger.
Bill 156 is a massive violation of the Charter of Rights. It would make it illegal to expose animal cruelty on farms, in slaughterhouses, and in transport trucks. This US-inspired Ag-Gag legislation is so dangerous because it would put compassionate citizens at risk of prosecution simply for telling the truth.
A large part of the public is unaware of the horror that farmed animals endure from the moment they're bred into existence until their violent end.
My friends need our help.
For now, we are their only hope.
Only hope.
Only hope.
Why would they want to
conceal the truth?
The truth.
The truth.
What are they hiding?